Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis. As always, with my co-host and Hall of Famer Steve Flink, as we continue the clay court swing. This week we had Munich and Barcelona for the men, and then we also had the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix in Stuttgart for the women. Interesting result in WTA side, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Steve, if okay with you, let's start with Munich. And we had two players in the final that desperately needed a good week. I would almost argue Zverev needed it more desperately than Ben, just at stages of career. But both finalists was Zverev beating Ben today. 6-2, 6-4. Both players needed a very good result this week.
Yeah, and Shelton was fortunate against Goho in the first round. He saved 3 match
Yep.
points, and that sometimes you get a reprieve like that. You feel like you've got somewhere between 7 and 9 lives, and
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 Steve, I mean, we should preface this by saying he lost in the first round in Monte Carlo the
right,
previous week, but it was to Davidovich Fokina, who he made the semis, I believe. So there's no
yeah,
shame in
yeah, he
losing
did.
that. But he just to say that he did lose very, very early in Monte Carlo, yet to a good player. But again, losing his first round in Monte Carlo, getting to the final here has to help him.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy transition, and that was not a bad loss by any means, as you point out. And but then he took advantage of his escape here in the first round. He got on a really good run. The most impressive was beating Cerundolo in the
I did
seventh.
not expect that result, Steve. I did
And he was
not.
getting killed. He was getting killed. It lost the first 6-2, and they went to a tiebreak in the second, which he squeaked out 9 points to seven. And then, he played a really good third. They had some early exchange of breaks, and he broke him in the last game of the match to seal it 6-4 in the third. I would have thought, there was an 8 and 10 chance, 9 and 10 chance that Cerundolo wins that match on clay. So that was a terrific win for Shelton to get to the final on the basis of beating that good a player. But today, Zverev never faced a break point. Zverev was, and Ben, you could sense, especially in the first set, he was feeling the pressure on his own serve because twice on 15-40 points in the first and seventh games of the opening set, he double faulted long on break point at 15-40 down. That to me was a sign of a little tension and of Sasha standing way back on the returns, and Ben wasn't able to solve that problem. He got broken again the opening start of the second set when Zverev hit one of his classic trademark cross-court backhands with a lot of interest on it and forced Ben into an error off his forehand. And that basically was it. Zverev, as I say, never faced a break point. So once he had that early break in the second, I think he was confident. And that's a big deal for him. He was 6-6 on the year. He'd had a bad stretch of since Australia, I should say. And that I really, as we talked about last time, I believe the loss lingered in Australia, losing the finals, not so much losing to Sinner, but losing another major final. And as much as he wanted to, he couldn't get over it that easily. He went out under the clay after there instead of going straight to the hard. There are a lot of factors here, but as he knew himself, David, so many of the matches that he lost in this stretch were very winnable, and that's what was bugging him, was that he wasn't closing people out. That's why he's going to be happy to celebrate his birthday today by winning his first title of the year.
And in Germany too. So
And at home, right? But mainly, just he did need that title, and now I suspect it's going to free him up a bit as he goes to Madrid and Rome and heading back to the French where he was in the finals, and he's going to be feeling a lot better about himself. And he's always been great on clay, so the triumph could not be more timely.
I
Very.
agree. He needed this week desperately. He really did. He would be the first to say that.
Yeah, and he also won a great match against Griekspoor. Griekspoor had served for the match against him, and of course he'd lost to him only not that many weeks earlier on the hard courts. And so to be down a set in 5-4 with this guy serving for the match, and then he breaks back and eventually wins in three. That was a golden moment for him, maybe a turning point in his 2025 campaign.
And I will say this about Ben Shelton, and I'll say it about the Americans in general, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, Steve. It's almost like they're spoiling the American tennis fans because like you'll get someone like a Ben have a great result, or Taylor's fighting an injury right now, or a Tommy or Francis even get far in a tournament, and then the next week they'll lose very early. It's almost like you're just you're yearning for that consistency from these guys. And every time you feel like, oh God, they're just not getting it done consistently wise, then someone pops a good result like Ben does. And I'd rather have that than have nothing at all. Don't get it wrong. I think all American fans would love to have, some inconsistency with great results than just bad results across the board, obviously. But it's like every time it's like a taste, but you just want more and more of it, Steve.
No, it's true. It's true. And look, it may be that there's going to be some events and some stretches, maybe in the summer on the hard courts, where a lot of the Americans do well the same week. We could get that too. But in the meantime, yeah, absolutely. That's the way it can unfold. And look, you just alluded to the draw that Ben had, Davidovich Fokina, very tough clay court customer. You're going to have weeks like that. It's going to
And
happen.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just wishing like what American fans want. These draws
Yeah,
are brutal,
they
especially
are.
with the depth of tennis. So I don't mean to say it like it's such a big disappointment. We're just yearning when we see really good results. We would love to have that be more consistent on a week to week basis.
Yeah, and who knows? As I say, later in the year could happen. Could happen. I suspect when they get all that crowd support back in the U.S. leading up to the Open, through the Open, we saw it last year. Look at last year.
Oh, amazing.
And look at the Open. Fritz and Tiafoe playing for a place in the final, and
Yep.
Fritz gets the win and goes to the final, loses to Sinner. Something like that could happen again this year.
Yeah, let's hope. All right, let's move to Barcelona. Carlos coming off his win in Monte Carlo. He gets to the final here, loses to Holger Rune. Holger Rune played great, 7-6, 6-2. Was something going on with Carlos's leg? He said, I just read about an hour ago, he's going to undergo an MRI tomorrow. He did admire. Someone asked him how Rafa did it week in and week out during this clay court swing. How Rafa sometimes won every clay court tournament he played certain years. And he admired how Rafa did it because it's a lot of matches, Steve. And even if he was healthy, it's almost like getting to the final is almost like, okay, now you're at the final. You may as well win it, right? You're playing the same amount of matches. If he lost in the quarters or the semis of this tournament, you'd be like, okay, at least he gets another day or two off, depending when he loses. Here, you make the final, you may as well win it then because it's the same amount of matches you play anyway, Steve.
It is, but it's look, you just can't plan these things. He didn't know he'd been in by his standards in something of a slump prior to Monte Carlo, and then he ends up winning three very tough matches in Monte Carlo. He dropped his opening set to Sarun Delo. He had that brutal match against Arthur Fils, and finally the final against Musetti, which got easier in the end because Musetti was hampered, but still it was a rugged week for him, you could say. And then he didn't have. There's not a big turnaround, just a few days off, and you're right back at it. In trying to be boosted by the crowds in Barcelona, but he kept talking about conserving energy, which he did well over the course of the week. And, he had some good wins, including De Minaur in the quarters. Carlos was competing well and bearing down when he needed to, but maybe it did finally catch up with him today. It was something with the right thigh. And he had the physio when he was he was actually up 2-1 in the second set on serve. At that point, when he left the court with a physio, came back and had it rubbed a little later. It wasn't apparent, David, watching it to me, that he was severely hampered, but who knows? You wouldn't do an MRI if you weren't really concerned. Having said that, Rune, the job that he did to win the first set especially was really impressive because he was down a break, 3-2. He got it right back. Then with Carlos serving 4-5, he had him 15-40. Carlos stymied him there with his service winner and a good, he had a good approach to the backhand, and Rune barely missed a pass. You couldn't really fault him for either of those. And then there were two more set points with Rune leading 6-4 in the breaker. And once again, Carlos saved both of those. And then at 6-all, Rune came up with a really good serve that to set up a forehand winner behind Carlos. And then a nice aggressive second serve return forced another error. So he wins at 8-6. That was very gritty stuff because
that mental gymnastics must be going on in your head when you're giving up so many set points to a player as great as Carlos.
Oh yeah. Plus, amidst it all, after he's missed the opportunity at 5-4 on Carlos's serve, they go to 5-all, 30-all. It's tense, and Rune plays a serve and volley, which I don't think he tried the whole set. He swung him wide in the deuce court, opened up the court, and played perfect drop volley winner. and held on in that game. So there were a lot of moments where it could have gotten away from where Carlos could have seized control of the match, and Rune didn't. So I really think Rune was in with a very good chance regardless of this injury. And let's face it, he hadn't played well the last few tournaments, but he had been in the final of Indian Wells, where he lost to Draper. So he was showing signs, and now he's going to be back in the top 10. And now we're being reminded of how this guy climbed to number 4 in the world in 2023. That was not an accident. And I remember thinking at the time, David, we all knew that the real pace setters were Carlos and Jannik Sinner, or Jannik Sinner and Carlos, whichever order you want to put them in. But Rune seemed like the guy that would be on their heels at that time. Then he had a lot of injuries. He had a lot of issues going on there with his body. And I don't really think physically he was up to it for quite a long time. But right now, he looks very fit. Had a little food poisoning last week, but that he got over that in Monte Carlo. And now he seems raring to go. And this not only had this win over Carlos, but he beat Khachanov in straight sets. He beat Casper Ruud, who I think was 6-1 against him going in. He beat Ruud in straight sets as well. So he really played top of the line tennis all week long in Barcelona. And to beat Carlos and handle the pressure of playing him in Spain like that he was very composed.
Yeah, well said. You mentioned Casper Ruud. I know for him, he'd like to step his game up a little bit right now during the clay court season, because he's had great clay court seasons in the past, and he's not playing to the level where he's been in the past. And I think he definitely needs to up his game going forward here.
Yeah, he does. But I'm sure he was disappointed at the match. But when he saw what Holger went on to do, maybe he forgave himself a little bit more. But I agree with you. The next bunch of tournaments, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, they're crucial for Ruud. He's really got to make a move, or else he's going to, he's in the semis of Roland. He's been in 2 Roland Garros finals and semis last year. So he really needs, just for the sake of his ranking and his confidence, to come alive in the weeks ahead. And hopefully he will. He's such a great clay court player. Hopefully he can get some draws that are a bit kinder, that allow him to sort of play his way back into form.
Let's talk about 3 names that if you're, we won't even talk about Madrid or Rome. We've definitely emphasized Roland Garros, but Cerundolo, Musetti, and Arthur Fils. If you draw any of those 3 players early if you are a seeded player, those guys are going to be seeded, obviously. Musetti, I don't know exactly where his ranking is, but it'll be close, maybe by Roland Garros. Those 3 guys you want to avoid at all costs, especially 3 out of 5. Those guys are all extremely dangerous.
Yeah, wait a minute. So you said Cerundolo, you said Cerundolo, Musetti, and who was your third?
Arthur Fils.
Oh, Fils, of course. Yeah. Now, Fils, that was interesting. Again, I left him out. Carlos played a really good match against Fils, too. So he had taken care of de Minaur and Fils back-to-back straight set wins.
And he played Fils very close in Monte Carlo. And he more straightforward this week.
Well, that's the thing. He'd come off a harrowing match against Fils in Monte Carlo that Carlos had, that he easily could have lost, because he's down a set in 5-all, love 40, holds on, then comes from a breakdown in the third at 1-3 to win 5 games in a row to win that match. So people were eagerly anticipating this rematch when they played here in Barcelona, but Carlos just dusted him off, played a really good match. So he'd come off 2 really impressive wins to me in a row over de Minaur and Fils, but he couldn't get the job done against Rune. All the more credit to Rune to beat him today.
Ben Shelton, you talk about a confidence-taking win. Beating Cerundolo on this surface was something that I did not see when they were heading out on court yesterday morning. We're doing this on Sunday afternoon, but Saturday morning in the States, when I saw that was going to be the matchup in the semis, I'm like, that's going to be tough sledding for Ben.
Well, I'll tell you what was so interesting about it, David. I felt exactly the same way, but I was amazed how well Ben hung with him from the backcourt. And some of that was Ben's own improvement from the baseline and his patience. And some of it was Cerundolo, I thought, was a bit off, to be honest, especially off his forehand side. I mean, I expected him to miss a few backhands, but his forehand was not up to par. And so Ben fully exploited it and served really well in third when he had to. So, but I'll be interested to see, because Cerundolo he'd lost that Monte Carlo match to Carlos and got destroyed after winning the first set. Now this one, I think he feels like he hasn't quite reached his best level yet on the clay yet either. So that's what makes Madrid and Rome intriguing for him as well. I'm expecting him to make a move in one of those tournaments, at least be in a semi of one of the two.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me one bit. He's damn good right now. All right, on the WTA side, I mean the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix. We're talking Ostapenko owning Iga Swiatek. She now is a 6-0 head-to-head record over Iga. It was the first time they played on clay. What's the famous quote by Vitas Gerulaitis, Steve? No one beats Vitas 19 times in a row or
That was
something.
17, yeah, 17 in a row.
17. We're not quite there
I have
yet,
to
but
say, David, I was lucky enough. That was at the Masters in Madison Square Garden, the 80 Masters. I I think it's one of the best moments I've ever experienced in a press conference, because the look on his face when he said that and the reaction in the room from all the reporters, it was just a great moment in press conference history. But you're right, and it's been alluded to by many players ever since who've tried to turn around bad matchups where they haven't been able to prevail. But this one to me is very strange. I understand the idea that on given days, Ostapenko is going to go out and blow Iga off the court.
As she does to any players. When she's
As she
hot,
does,
she can blow
right.
players off the court.
She can. So that's understandable, but not to have it happen time and time and time, and particularly to have this one be their first clay court meeting and have Iga fare no better. And when she took the second set to get back in the match, I thought, okay, I thought maybe this is where she makes her move. But before she really was. The third set was pretty clear cut, 6-2 set. She had one moment where you thought she might break back at 4-1 down the third. I just felt like she didn't look any more confident or any more comfortable, Iga, on the clay than she has in hard court clashes against Ostapenko. That's what amazed me. She didn't look as if she had any solutions out there to find a way to get on top of the rallies or extend the rallies the way she would have liked. So Ostapenko is definitely in her head. And also, in fairness, Ostapenko seems to keep peaking every time she plays her. She doesn't seem to have a bad day against Iga, so Iga's not getting any help. But I hope that you pointed out to me that they might meet again in Madrid in the 16s. And boy, that'll become very important, because if Iga loses again on the clay, then this is going to start to sort of play with her mind in terms of going back and defending Roland Garros. It could affect her beyond this particular head-to-head to just her whole mindset about going back to the major she loves the most.
That's what gets crazy when you have a match of head-to-head so one-sided like this. It's almost like, okay, forget the physical part of it now, the strategic part of it. How much of it is mental, right? And it's got to get into your head when you know, oh my God, I have not beaten this person 6 times in this case. And you're just going out there be like, this is going to be the worst. And the other player, in this case, Ostapenko, and they've asked her in the press conference, she knows how to play. She's not revealing the secrets to anyone in the press conference, but this isn't luck by Ostapenko. She has a strategy that she takes when she goes out there and plays Iga every single time.
Yeah, she does. And I'd love to hear her. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when she reveals that strategy. But I just feel like, yeah, that's part of the answer, and the rest of it is, what is it in Iga that what's lacking in her mind? Has she not come up? Has she not shaped the right strategy to turn this around? And obviously, she's a very smart player. We know how professional she is. We know how much she puts into her matches strategically and tactically, and I feel like that's also surprising too. Obviously, Ostapenko is going to get a little cocky if you keep beating somebody time and again. Why wouldn't you believe in yourself? But the question is going to be, what formula can Iga come up with to combat this? So that next match, to me, particularly since it's another clay court clash, becomes almost monumental in terms of Iga and the near future.
Right. And again, we reference it. There's a pot. The women's draw just came out. The men's draw is not out yet. They're starting the qualifying in Madrid, but there is a chance in the round of 16. Steve referenced earlier that Ostapenko can play Swiatek again. If it doesn't happen in this tournament, they can play in Roland Garros too. So there's some big opportunities for these two players to match up again. As we go into
David, it's interesting. You think of that match that Naomi played again, almost had her
Mhm.
They couldn't quite finish off Iga at Roland Garros, and I feel like that. But to me, that was a breathtaking display.
Yeah.
I mean, watching that was just Naomi at the peak of her powers. Naomi recapturing the old Naomi and played a brilliant match. Some of these matches, I don't feel like even Ostapenko made a comment after the match that in the third set, in essence, what she was saying was she was calculating. She was trying not to make dumb errors or unnecessary errors. So she dialed it back a bit, and even that worked. Now you would not think that is a plan that would work against Iga, but on this particular day on clay, it did.
Yeah, that was what was extraordinary. We all know once Ostapenko gets hot, she could redline, she can beat anybody, and just not even you feel helpless sometimes on the other side of the net. But as what you described, that was not always the case in yesterday's match between the
Yeah,
two. All right, well, we head to Madrid. We got two. What I think we got two 1000s back to back now. We got some big tournaments. This clay court season tends to, at least for me, run pretty long, and it could be pretty tiring and brutal on certain players if they keep getting into latter rounds of each of these tournaments before they get to Roland Garros. And then you got 3 out of 5. Let's hope Carlos and everybody else who has any lingering injuries, let's hope they're healthy. There's still a lot of tennis to be played before the French Open. But
Dave, you know that you're right, and you just touched on something that was spinning through my mind, which is that the organizers in Madrid, are dreading the results of that MRI of Carlos, or they've got their fingers crossed on a more positive note that somehow it comes out that there's nothing seriously wrong, excuse me, and that he's able to compete there. They don't want to lose him in that field. They already have Djokovic there practicing with Murray, and Zverev will come in there flying high. There's a lot of positives, but they don't want to lose, especially the year out after Rafa's retired. I mean, they need Carlos in that field. So
the
they,
one thing they have going for them, Steve, is that this Madrid is extended a little bit. So it's not like Carlos would be playing on
no,
Tuesday.
true. He probably wouldn't start before Friday, but
Right.
still,
So they have time on their side a little
yeah,
bit.
Friday, Saturday, maybe, but still, that's not a long time. I mean, so if there's anything going on, if something comes out of that MRI, Carlos has to be careful because his first priority is going to be Roland Garros. So if that means missing Madrid, he'll miss Madrid.
But
So
I'm just saying, even for the top players, like just that Madrid has time on their side. This is brutal going back to back, weeks.
oh, it is.
For players who do make the latter rounds, at least Madrid has a little bit of time on their side to give some
Yeah,
rest.
I'm just saying in terms of Carlos, that's 5 days. That might not be enough depending on what this is. I hope it is because I don't want them to lose him and all the excitement that he can create in Madrid. We need him there.
Yeah, well, this was fun, Steve. Let's see where we are next weekend, where we are in Madrid, and see if we want to do a quick chat on the tournament at that point. If not, we'll definitely do it um, after Madrid. So, with any final thoughts before we sign off today?
No, no, I just think it's been an exciting week. We have all those tournaments going on simultaneously, and I feel like it sets the stage for a pretty exciting Madrid with the men and the women. I'm looking forward to it.
Does the Ben Shelton result, if I had to ask you today, predict obviously the draw means everything, but if you were to lean on an American to have the best result in Roland Garros, does this result from Ben sway you or?
Somewhat to maybe a little more than somewhat because of the conditions in Madrid, the altitude. With his game, that might really suit him. Those conditions being quicker, and so I kind of feel like if he can do it the way he did this week and then go on into faster conditions, it's very encouraging.
Let's see. Excited to see all these players the next week perform as the clay court swing continues, culminating in Roland Garros in a few weeks. Steve, thanks again for doing this today.
Thank you, David. Enjoyed it.